Good afternoon, everybody. So let me just start by saying that our vision in education is towards providing anytime, anywhere learning for all. And all the activities that we do any place is geared up towards having this mission in mind always. I would just like to set the stage by saying something that Mahatma Gandhi said, and which is very relevant in the context of what we are discussing today. So what he said in effect was that the potential of every child is immense, and it really depends on the power of education to uncover it. Now think for an instance, there's this plumber's son who's sitting in a village in Tirupur and wanting to learn trigonometry. And think of his counterpart who's probably sitting in one of these really high-end colleges and wanting to learn trigonometry as well. So should the opportunities be the same or not? Yes. And that's the role the present-day technology has to play. The opportunity for technology has become so immense that it has a role to play every facet of education going forward. Coming again to this plumber's son sitting in Tirupur, he probably works during the day and he doesn't really have time to access any kind of an education. So to broaden the access of education, the way he can gain knowledge in a self-paced style is pretty important. Once again, now student-centered learning is what is required. He might be great in maths because he has a lot of buying, selling, exchange of cash, but he might not be knowing anything else. Which is why the way he learns it, compared to his counterpart sitting somewhere else, is again important, hence the relevance of personalized learning. Again, he might be able to create differentiators for himself by which he differentiates himself in the village. But how does he gain 21st century skills, which is attuned towards soft learning skills, towards giving him life skills, which makes him a better person for tomorrow? That's where technology comes into play. The teacher who probably teaches him, does he know how to tutor this person? Does he know what are the best practices which are being followed in some other parts of the geography? Probably not. But if we create a vibrant knowledge ecosystem, then that's where these teachers can collaborate to see how to differentiate the teaching styles across students. And finally, efficiency of an entire educational system can be changed dramatically by the impact of technology. A quick look at the Indian education system, and while some of the statistics have already been shared, I would dwell into some of these things once again just to set the backdrop of what we can collectively look at vision for 2020. The three challenges which exist across an education as we all know it is access, equity, and the content which is there. Now if you look across the student profile, the way kind of progress across the education system, the gross enrollment ratio in higher education is just 12% to a global average of 23%. That's the second data point. The third one is that we in India have very little PG students as compared to the rest of the world. Do we need this? How do we do this to keep on maintaining a competitive edge? And finally, most of the students in India, after 10 and 12 standard, want to get into vocational education. However, we have a 1990 syndrome, wherein 90% of the jobs in India require skill sets, and 90% of our education is knowledge related. Obviously, there's a skill mismatch. 25% of our students who are engineers are only employable, the rest are not. 90% of our college graduates are not employable. With this in mind, how do we bring some changes in the learning system, and how do we look at tomorrow to ensure that learning solves some of these situations? So collectively, is this something that we can look at towards a vision of 2020? Is it that we can provide IT literacy as a basic right to all by 2020? Now I'll break this discussion into two parts. First, I'll kind of talk about some of the demographic changes which have been happening, and I'll kind of talk about how we look at achieving this. Some of the changing dynamics which are interesting are as follows. The GDP mix across years has been consistently changing, and now 2/3 of the GDP is being contributed by services as against agriculture, which was there earlier. Another important point to note is that in rural economy, non-agriculture related businesses contribute to more than 50% of the economic activities. Now what happens is that people from rural areas will go in for an urban migration. And if you were to stop it, you need to bring in learning and earning opportunities in the rural space. So the need for learning is clearly A, which is non-traditional, and B, in the rural area. Secondly, as was pointed out earlier, the youth population in India is really huge. 75% of our population is below 35 years of age. And by 2014, about 241 million of the youth population will be becoming employable. The requirement for them is to gain these job skills which make them employable. So the need is twofold. They need the skill sets. Secondly, the demand of teachers who can impart this. And finally, in the consumption basket, in the next few years, education will be occupying the third spot after food and healthcare, which goes on to say device and content. In connectivity, the single biggest requirement is to ensure that we provide access across to rural areas. And in that, one of the recommendations is that if there are these anchor institutions, which are places like, say, the education institutions, the hospitals, the healthcare places where people come across and there are activities which are happening, if we provide broadband access, which is either 100 Mbps or 1 Gbps, and disseminate information from there, can these become spokes for e-learning? Coming to device, the need for the hour is personalized learning, which can happen through a personalized device. I need a device at a point of time to gain the information that I require. Again, affordable computing by way of having affordable access by the way of having cloud computing is the need for the hour. And finally, coming to the content part, I go back to my plumber's son. He probably needs to know about Pythagoras' theory the next day. He tries to go across to a search site and looks for this search engine and types something in Bing. And the results pop out because he just probably knows the spelling of Pythagoras in English. But after the search comes out, he really doesn't know what to do. So the need is again to ensure that you localize the content, give it in a way in which he can consume it. So these are some of the ways in which we feel that if you tweak the learning system, it can be made more relevant, more accessible, more personalized, and more scalable. I'll quickly cover a few points in terms of what has been Microsoft's mission in the Indian ecosystem, and we've been actually driving three things across the years, which is transforming education, fostering local innovation, and working with the ecosystem towards job creation. Towards transforming education, our flagship program